do we really have the N value resolution that we need to model this channel? Absolutely not. That is terrible. And so we're going to make it unterrible because that's our job. We're engineers. We make the world unterrible until our unintended consequences catch up with us. I'm not going to do the whole thing. I'm going to just do a little bit, but you get the idea. And so then we have an open water value. So I'm going to go choose that open water value and associate it. Oh, I missed a step. That's there because I went to edit land cover data and went in and put in these arbitrary values that I thought sounded good, because all cultivated crops have an N value of 0.055. That's a law of the universe. No, it's not. So we're going to have to do something about that. Okay, so that was kind of the easy part, right? We got through, we imported our land cover data, we associated our N value, and then we created our classification polygon to add some detail to the channel. The next thing we do is we go to manage our geometry association. And again, sometimes it will guess well, and sometimes we want to help it guess, but we have to make sure that association is made. The geometry file needs to be pointed to these layers, and this is where you do it. Now we can actually go to the part of the interface that says Manning's N, because we have content for that to rest on. And so if we turn on the Manning's N value, now if you hover over, you can see what each of these is and what the base Manning's N is. If we go up and turn on our 2D grid, now we can actually go to the edges. We have to have that selected and plot our N value property tables. And we can do it for different cells, or we can just kind of right click on where we want it to be. Okay, but that's not primarily what you want to do. Primarily what you want to do is come in here and work with your N values. And so this is where the calibration regions come in. And so I'm going to start editing the geometry on the calibration region. And now if I go to edit Manning's N value, I haven't drawn anything yet. We will draw a calibration region, but you'll notice that there actually is a field here that exists even though I haven't created any polygons. And that's because you can go in and just put base overrides for these parameters wherever they exist in this geometry. And that's the big distinction here. If you make a change to your land cover layer, it'll propagate through all the geometries that are associated with that layer. But let's say that you have two geometries associated with the same base land cover, but then you went in and put in a parking lot, paved paradise, and now you want to change the local land cover layer. If you do it here, you're going to do it at the geometry scale. That will only change the local geometry, and it won't propagate to other geometries that are looking at the same land cover layer. The other thing that you can do here, this is something that Gary talked about, is that one of the things we like to do, to feed our downstream users, downstream as in downstream of the workflow, the FDA folks, they want to know the uncertainty. And so one of the things we'll often do is change our N values by plus or minus 10%, because that is certainly the level of error that we're dealing with my 0.055 here. Plus or minus 10% is generous. And so you can go into these base overrides and add plus or minus 10%. But let's say that what you really want is to look at a particular region. And that's why we call these calibration regions. I'm going to go in and create a region where I want to edit the N value in particular. And so this region is a vortex of cosmic uncertainty. And so I'm going to call it Calibration Region 1. And I would give it a much better name because naming conventions are important. And now what you see is that you not only have those kind of base global overrides, but now you have additional overrides in that region. And the reason that you have all overrides for each of these land use types is that that region is going to include different land use types. So you can go in and say that, in this particular region, the shrub and scrub is shrubbier and scrubbier. So that's going to be a 0.008. And the pasture and hay, well, it's been grazed, so it's going to be 0.045. And if you're at that level of detail, I'm sorry. But those are the sorts of things that you can do to try to affect your water surface elevations and make the changes at the production level while you're trying to, match velocities and high water marks. All right, let me throw it to Cam and Gary, who use these more often to get some additional content.
So just to reiterate something that's really important that he said, but the calibration regions are only for that specific geometry, okay? Whereas the land cover is kind of a generic layer that you can attach to multiple geometries. And so the general approach in calibrating is you want to get the best base end values you can in your land cover. So that's why you get your land cover and you make your own classification polygons right down there, because you're going to have channel end values that you want for your base end values everywhere. So you should do as best job you can in that land classification layer and creating your own classification policies to get your best possible base end values that you can apply to lots of geometries. And then from there, when you go to start calibrating events, let's say you have 3 events to calibrate to, well, you're really going to create 3 geometries because you might actually need slightly different end values for those 3 events. If you don't, that's great. Then just one geometry and you adjust the end values. And maybe that will work out for all 3 events. But if it doesn't, you'll have to create another geometry and slightly change calibration and et cetera. And then once you've run all 3 events, then you might do a weighting of those to get your final end values for production runs. Just like we've historically done for any kind of modeling, whether it's 1D or hydrology or whatever, right? That's the kind of process for calibrating.
We have 3 minutes for questions before we're going to send you guys off on a break. So anybody have any dire questions?
Hey, I was wondering how the end values are calculated for each cell face.
So each cell face is treated just like a cross section, and it looks at the cell face and figures out what land use is or land cover is beneath it, and then whatever is in the center of that face, that's what ends up kind of winning the day. We do have plans in the future to do horizontal and vertical variation. I think horizontal will get done first. But if you have really small cell sizes, we don't need to really worry about horizontal variation. But as we get bigger and bigger cells, which is kind of the point of the finite volume methodology we're using in RAS, then it'd be nice if we had that horizontal variation in Manning's end value.
Is there a way to use like a multiplication factor for all the end values or a specific amount?
If Stan feels comfortable with it, what you can do, you have to first copy the column. So you copy the base end value. The way this table works right now is copy that. The first step is you have to copy the values and put it into a second column. And then the next step is you can multiply them or do, so all the buttons up there on the top, you have add, you have multiply, and you have replace.
So highlight the base end value. Oh, you did it already, okay. I think we need to add a rounding option, a number of significant digits to that.
There's a rounding option.
So Cam, you said that it was the center of the face that takes precedence rather than it's not like an averaged or anything?
It is, no, it's just the center of the face. We don't do a weighted average.
We have plans that, like Cam was saying, it will, in a future version, if there are like 5 end values actually across the face, it'll pick up all 5 end values. And those are going to be at different elevations though, right? So you don't want to weight them just based on their length. So what it's going to do is it's going to do a conveyance weighting. So at lowest flow, whatever end values are within the water will get weighted. And as you come up in higher depths, you'll get a weighting based on conveyance. And so that's planned to do. It's just not, we haven't had time to do it, but that'll be in a future version. And then later on, then you'll be able to also vary end values versus depth. So you'll have a base set of end values that you say, these end values are good from 0 to a foot. But if I go from a foot to 5 feet, I want to lower those by 5%. If I go from 5 feet to 50 feet, I want to lower them by 10%. That kind of thing.